There is a sweetness in nature that predates memory. Before temples were built, before the first fires were tamed, there was the hum, the low sacred vibration of bees moving between flowers, gathering sunlight made liquid. In those ancient meadows, before humankind even spoke the word divine, the bees already knew it. They carried in their wings a language older than prayer, older than scripture, and what they created was not merely food, it was a code, a golden key to something vast and eternal. The ancients called it the food of the gods, but few ever asked why. Perhaps because to taste it was to feel the pulse of heaven itself. Honey has always been more than sweetness. It is sunlight trapped in amber, time crystallized, energy condensed into a form the body recognizes as sacred. In every civilization that ever touched it, from Egypt to Sumer, from the Vedic plains to the high monasteries of Tibet, honey was never just nourishment. It was a bridge between flesh and spirit, between the seen and the unseen, between what we are and what we once were. The Egyptians placed jars of honey beside their dead, believing it would guide the soul through the darkness. The Greeks said it was the diet of immortals. The Hebrews called it the promise of paradise, a land flowing with milk and honey. The Celts saw it as a golden essence of life, poured by the sun through the hands of bees. In every language, in every era, honey whispered the same silent truth, that within its sweetness lives a memory of the divine order. But what is this mystery that made it sacred? What secret hums beneath its golden surface? Science will tell you honey is made by enzymes and nectar, a process of chemistry. But chemistry, in its truest sense, is alchemy, a transformation that mirrors the soul's own journey. The bee takes what is fleeting, a drop of nectar, a breath of perfume, and turns it into something eternal. Through darkness, through motion, through the vibration of countless wings, it performs a miracle that the human body recognizes. Honey does not rot. It does not decay. It holds its essence for thousands of years. Archaeologists have found it in tombs older than our written words, still golden, still alive. How can something natural resist time itself? What secret frequency does it hold? Inside honey are patterns invisible to the naked eye, hexagonal perfection, the geometry of creation. Every comb mirrors the pattern of snowflakes, the architecture of cells, the hidden mathematics of the universe. The bees, without ever learning, construct with the precision of cosmic law. To the mystics, this geometry was not accidental. It was sacred design, the same principle that shapes galaxies, spirals of shells, the chambers of the human heart. The bees simply obeyed it. They never questioned the divine code written into their instincts. And within that obedience lies their purity. Perhaps that is what humans lost, the silent harmony between work and worship, between purpose and peace. The bee knows no separation. Its labor is prayer, its movement is meditation. And through this union of devotion and creation, honey is born. The ancients knew that to consume honey was to take into oneself that same vibration, the vibration of divine alignment. To eat honey with awareness was to commune with the very rhythm of the cosmos. In Sanskrit, honey is madhu, a word that also means sweetness of existence. The Rig Veda, one of humanity's oldest texts, calls it the essence of immortality. The Madhu Vidya, the doctrine of honey, was an ancient Indian teaching that described honey not as a food, but as a spiritual concept. The sages believed that within honey lived the condensed wisdom of all flowers, all herbs, all trees, the soul of the earth gathered into a single drop. To taste it was to taste the universe, and yet, in our modern world, we have forgotten to see, we have forgotten to feel. We buy honey in jars and drizzle it on bread, unaware that we are partaking in a sacrament, unaware that this golden thread connects us to civilizations that knelt before it with reverence, unaware that every spoonful is a message, written in light and carried through time by the hum of 1,000 wings. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing in an ancient grove, the air heavy with the scent of wildflowers. The bees move like living prayers, weaving between petals, carrying secrets you cannot hear. Each sound is a word, each vibration a syllable of the universe's forgotten language. You breathe in and something in you stirs, an old memory, not of the mind, but of the soul. The sweetness of being alive, the feeling that life itself is sacred. That is the first truth of honey. It reminds us of what we are made of, because within its structure lies something our bodies recognize instinctively. Honey resonates with the human frequency. It harmonizes with our cells, our blood, our breath. When it touches the tongue, it awakens not only the senses, but the spirit. That warmth that travels through you is more than pleasure. It is remembrance. Your body remembers the sun. It remembers the flowers. It remembers the cycle of life in which nothing is wasted, nothing is lost. The sweetness becomes a key, unlocking something ancient within. For centuries, mystics have said that every element in nature carries a song, a vibration that either heals or harms. Honey's song is one of harmony. It balances, it restores. It is one of the few natural substances that nourishes both flesh and faith. Even the Bible speaks of its divine nature. In the book of Proverbs, honey is compared to wisdom itself, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. The ancients were not speaking metaphorically. They knew something science is only beginning to rediscover. Modern studies have found that honey carries enzymes capable of purifying, restoring, regenerating. It contains compounds that activate healing at a cellular level, that calm inflammation, that awaken dormant immune responses. But beyond the molecules, there is an energy, subtle yet real, that cannot be measured, only felt. It is the same energy that bees carry from flower to flower, the same frequency that makes their dance a language of creation. And so honey becomes a mirror of the divine process, transformation through devotion. Think of it, millions of tiny acts of service, thousands of wings moving in perfect rhythm, each bee contributing a drop of light, until the hive glows like a temple made of gold. That is how creation happens, not through force, but through harmony, not through competition, but through communion. The hive is a reflection of the universe itself, structured, sacred, alive. Within it, everything has meaning. Every movement, a prayer. Every sound, a mantra. Every drop of honey, a testament that the smallest being can carry the greatest light. In the temples of ancient Egypt, honey was poured on altars as an offering to the gods. It was used in embalming, not only for preservation, but as a symbol, to show that the soul like honey does not decay. The priests anointed their skin with it, believing it sealed the body in divine protection. The pharaohs, when entombed, were surrounded by jars of honey, so that their spirits might feed on eternity. Even Cleopatra, whose beauty was legend, bathed in honey and milk, believing that such a union of sweetness and purity connected her to the gods themselves. It is no wonder, then, that honey was seen as more than matter. It was spirit in liquid form. But perhaps the most mysterious aspect of honey is this: it is born through cooperation, not domination. Bees do not hoard. They serve the hive, and through that service, they create abundance. Each bee dies never tasting the full sweetness of its own labor, and yet it works with joy. There is a lesson there, hidden between the petals and the hum. A lesson about purpose, about giving, about becoming part of something greater. The honeycomb, if you look closely, is a map of perfection. Its cells, each identical, fit together with no space wasted, no energy lost. The ancients believed that the hexagon, six-sided symmetry, was the signature of divine intelligence. The same shape appears in the molecular patterns of snowflakes, the structure of quartz crystals, the bonds of carbon, the very foundation of life. The bees, without knowing, build in accordance with the same geometry that forms stars. So when you look at honey, you are looking at the architecture of the universe, the order of creation in edible form. To eat honey, then, is not simply to consume. It is to participate. You are tasting harmony, light, labor, love and time all condensed into a single moment of sweetness. You are joining the dance of creation, even if just for a breath. That is why, in the old traditions, honey was never eaten carelessly. It was taken with prayer, with gratitude, with awareness that one is partaking of something that belongs to both heaven and earth. And perhaps that is what we have forgotten: the reverence for the small miracles that sustain us, The bee, no larger than a thumb, carries in its body the secret of creation. The honey, no heavier than air, carries the memory of eternity. In ancient Greece, priests of the temple of Artemis would whisper before tasting honey, "This is the breath of the gods." The phrase was lost, buried under centuries of translation, but its essence remains. The sweetness of honey is not mere taste, it is vibration, resonance, communion. The Egyptians said Ra, the sun god, wept tears of light that became bees. From those tears came honey. Sunlight turned sacred. The Vedic sages said honey was the secret connection between the gods and men. The Mayans believed it was the blood of the sun. Different cultures, same truth. Honey is the condensed light of creation, and that light, when taken in, does something mysterious to us. It reminds us of the divine sweetness hidden beneath all struggle. The world teaches bitterness, but nature always holds sweetness in secret places. To taste honey is to remember that within every wound, healing waits. Within every winter, spring sleeps. Within every life, something eternal hums softly, waiting to be remembered. And that is where our journey begins, with the hum. The sound that connects all things. The bee's wings vibrate at a frequency that mirrors the Om, the sacred sound of the universe. When they move together, the hive becomes a living mantra. Every vibration purifies, every hum heals. The bees do not know they are chanting, yet their labor resonates with the very sound that created the world. Is that why ancient mystics called honey divine? Because it carries the vibration of creation itself? Perhaps that is what the gods tasted, not the sweetness but the resonance, the reminder that life in its purest form is harmony. And as we walk through the world, weary and disconnected, perhaps what we need most is not new knowledge but remembrance, to remember the hum, the sweetness, the quiet wisdom of the bees who create light from darkness. Honey, then, is not simply food. It is a symbol of what we are called to become. Beings who transform the ordinary into the sacred, who take what is fleeting and make it eternal, who live in service and create sweetness from sunlight. That is the mystery of honey, and that is why it has always been called the food of the gods. In the silence of ancient sanctuaries, long before words were written on stone or parchment, honey was poured into vessels of clay and placed before statues carved in gold. The air would shimmer faintly in the candlelight, as if the sweetness itself breathed. The priests would lower their heads in reverence, not because they worshipped the bees, but because they recognized the divine pattern within them. The bee was the messenger, the intermediary between heaven and earth, carrying light from the celestial to the physical, transforming the invisible into something tangible. It is said that the Egyptians believed bees were born from the tears of Ra, the sun god. When Ra wept, his tears fell upon the desert sands and turned into golden bees, who spread across the land, bringing life wherever they flew. Those tears, solidified into sweetness, became honey. To the ancient mind, this was no mere myth. It was a way to describe something they could feel but not measure. That honey was sunlight made flesh, that it carried the divine essence of creation itself. Imagine for a moment living in a world lit only by fire and stars, where every sound of nature was a language, every breeze a whisper of something beyond comprehension. To those who looked closely, honey was not simply nourishment, it was proof that the gods had not abandoned the earth. The sweetness of honey arriving from the labor of tiny, tireless beings was a message from the heavens, that within chaos there was still harmony, within suffering there was still beauty. The Greeks took this truth and wove it into their own mythology. They called honey melit, and believed it was the sustenance of Olympus. Zeus himself, they said, was fed honey by the divine nymph Melissa when he was a child hidden in a cave from his devouring father, Kronos. Without honey, Zeus would not have survived, and thus the god's reign was born from sweetness. The very ruler of thunder owed his strength to the humblest of creatures. In Delphi, where the oracle spoke her riddles wrapped in incense, priests burned honey on sacred fires to awaken the prophetic spirit. The smoke that rose was said to carry messages from mortals to the divine, and from the divine back to mortals. Honey was not just an offering, it was a bridge a golden frequency that both gods and men could understand. Across the deserts, in the holy lands of Canaan, honey became the symbol of promise, a land flowing with milk and honey. Yet few today understand what that phrase truly meant. It was not about abundance of material things, but about the abundance of divine favor. Honey was the sign that nature itself was aligned with heaven, that the laws of the world were in harmony, that sweetness, both literal and spiritual, was flowing freely. To the mystics, honey symbolized enlightenment. Just as the bee gathered nectar from countless flowers and transformed it through the mystery of the hive, so too does the soul gather experiences through lifetimes, distilling them into wisdom. Each sting, each storm, each sunlit day contributes to the nectar of the spirit. And what emerges, after patience and transformation, is sweetness, compassion, peace, understanding. The ancients saw in honey the story of humanity itself, and yet within the sacred texts of nearly every faith, honey appears not as an ingredient, but as revelation. In the Quran, it is written that within honey lies healing for humankind. In the Psalms, David writes that God's words are sweeter than honey. The Buddha, after his enlightenment, was offered honey by forest monks, the first food to touch his lips after he awakened. And in the Hebrew scriptures, Samson found honey inside the carcass of a lion, sweetness born from death, life arising from decay. Each story carries the same secret. Honey is the proof that the divine hides inside the humble, that light is born within darkness, that what nourishes the soul is often hidden in the smallest acts of creation. Consider the bee again, small, fragile, yet fearless. It moves from flower to flower, guided by patterns invisible to human eyes. It sees the world through ultraviolet light, perceiving what we cannot. It dances not for pleasure but to communicate, tracing invisible maps in the air that guide others home. Within that dance lies sacred geometry, a code that mirrors the structure of atoms, the spin of galaxies, the very breath of existence. Every movement of the bee is in alignment with the pulse of creation. When the ancients spoke of the food of the gods, they did not mean that honey was reserved for divine beings. They meant that through it, humanity could touch divinity. That to taste honey was to be reminded of one's origin, to remember that the same light flowing through the bee's wings flows through human blood, that the sweetness of honey is the sweetness of being itself. But the mystery deepens still. Hidden within honey are frequencies, electromagnetic patterns that respond to vibration and intention. Modern instruments can now detect subtle changes when honey is exposed to music, prayer, or spoken words. In Japan, researchers observed how honey crystallizes differently when words of gratitude are spoken nearby. The patterns become more harmonious, more beautiful, more symmetrical. When exposed to anger or noise, the crystals distort. What the ancients intuited through reverence, modern science is beginning to rediscover. That honey is alive. It listens, it remembers. Perhaps that is why in old rituals, honey was always blessed before use. Priests would whisper sacred words over it, not to command it, but to align it, to attune its frequency to the vibration of healing. Because honey, like water, carries memory. It absorbs emotion. It reflects intention. And when consumed, it brings that vibration into the body, harmonizing the heart and restoring what the modern world has dissonated. The ancients believed that every part of creation was conscious. The bee, the flower, the wind, all were threads in the same divine tapestry. And honey was the knot where all threads met, where earth, air, fire, and water joined hands. In the sacred ceremonies of the Druids, honey was poured upon stones and roots to awaken the energy of the land. The Celts believed that the golden substance held the power to connect the realms, to invite the ancestors to the table, to speak with spirits, to renew life where death had passed. They called it the breath of the sun caught in the arms of the earth. And in India, during the ancient ritual of Panchamrita, honey was one of 5 sacred nectars: milk for purity, yogurt for strength, ghee for prosperity, sugar for joy, and honey for immortality. Together, they formed the elixir of divine offering, the same essence believed to have been poured upon the idols of gods for thousands of years. To drink honey was to drink remembrance, to recall that humanity was born not from chaos, but from divine sweetness. In the Himalayas, monks of the old Tibetan lineages would consume drops of honey before meditation. They believed it opened the heart chakra, aligning the vibration of the body with the sound of the universe. Honey, they said, was the nectar of consciousness, a substance that reminded the spirit of its divine origin. The same monks taught that honey could absorb prayer, that if one spoke blessings into a jar of honey each morning and then took a small taste, the body would begin to heal not only physically but spiritually, because the words had become part of the essence. It is this invisible bridge between the spoken and the unspoken, the physical and the divine, that gives honey its mystery. Every jar, every drop is an echo of creation. And still, the more one looks, the deeper the mystery becomes. Honey never dies. It can last thousands of years without corruption. Why? Because within it lies balance, perfect proportion between acid and alkali, between water and fire, between the forces of decay and preservation. It holds equilibrium, the same equilibrium the ancients sought in the human soul. They believed that to live long and pure, one had to live like honey, balanced between spirit and matter, neither spoiling from excess nor drying from neglect. Honey became the teacher, the mirror, the path. There were even whispers among esoteric sects that honey was used in the anointing of prophets, not just for its scent or texture, but for what it awakened. When placed on the tongue, they said, it opened the gates of perception, allowing one to taste truth as sweetness. To taste truth, one mystic wrote, is to know God. And perhaps that is the truest revelation hidden in this ancient substance, that the divine is not bitter, not punishing, not distant. The divine is sweet, gentle, near. The divine meets us not through thunder, but through sweetness. When honey touches the tongue, the body responds with peace. The pulse slows, the breath deepens. Something in the nervous system remembers safety. It is as if the body recognizes a friend. In that moment, we are not just eating, we are communing. We are receiving an ancient message that says, you belong, you are part of this. The bees do not know they are delivering a sermon, but they are. In every drop they remind us there is no separation between the sacred and the simple, between heaven and earth, between sweetness and struggle. And so the ancients honored them, not only with offerings but with imitation. The way they built temples mirrored the honeycomb, symmetrical, hexagonal, filled with light. The way they prayed echoed the hum of bees, rhythmic and resonant. Even their chants, their mantras, were said to vibrate in the same frequency range as the sound of a hive. They were not copying the bees. They were remembering through them. Because the bees have never forgotten. They still hum the same song they did thousands of years ago. The same note that shaped the world still vibrates through their wings. That is why honey, across millennia, across continents, carries the same sacred title, the food of the gods. Not because the gods eat it, but because through it we remember that we, too, are made of divine sweetness. The revelation is simple and yet infinite. The divine is not above us. It flows through us. It hums in the hive, glows in the sunlight, and rests within every drop of golden honey. And when we take that sweetness into ourselves with reverence, we become what we consume. We become carriers of light. That is the secret the ancients knew, and the modern world has forgotten. Honey is not the food of the gods because they created it. It is the food of the gods because it reminds us that divinity is not a place, but a vibration, and that vibration lives in all things that are pure, harmonious, and alive. There is a moment, quiet and almost invisible, when the veil between the seen and unseen begins to lift. It happens not through thunder or revelation, but through sweetness, through the slow unfolding of understanding that what we once called ordinary has always been sacred. Honey is not a gift from outside us. It is a reflection of what lies within. Every cell, every drop of blood, carries the same longing for balance, harmony, and light that the bees embody in their tireless devotion. And when that realization dawns, something begins to change. Transformation begins in silence, in the stillness of morning, when the sun has not yet risen and the world feels suspended between night and day. The bees are already awake. They move with purpose, as though guided by something unseen, a rhythm older than time. They do not rush, they do not question, they simply are. That is the secret of transformation. It does not happen through force, but through alignment. Honey is born not from struggle, but from surrender, from trust in the process. Perhaps that is why honey heals, because it teaches the body what the soul has forgotten, how to flow, how to harmonize, how to transform. When you take honey into your mouth and let it rest on your tongue, something subtle happens. The body remembers. The sweetness triggers ancient pathways of memory, igniting not only the taste but the essence of vitality itself. Within seconds, enzymes awaken, the nervous system calms, and the heart slows its anxious beat. There is no command, no effort, only response. The body recognizes honey as something of itself, something it has always known. And in that instant, you are not merely consuming, you are remembering the rhythm of creation. In that remembrance lies healing. Science tries to explain it with chemistry, the glucose, the antioxidants, the enzymes that cleanse wounds and soothe throats. But the ancients never separated the body from the spirit. To them, every physical cure carried a spiritual meaning. The healing power of honey was not only in its substance, but in its essence, its purity, its harmony, its willingness to serve. When the body receives honey, it also receives that message, that balance is possible, that harmony can be restored. The mystics of the East used to say that honey does not simply heal the wound, it teaches the wound to remember its wholeness. Because beneath every sickness lies a story of forgetting the body's sacred design, forgetting the soul's connection to the divine. Honey, in its silent sweetness, whispers that remembrance back into the cells. Transformation is not always dramatic. Sometimes it happens through the smallest of acts. A spoonful of honey before dawn, a moment of gratitude before eating, a silent prayer carried on the breath. These gestures, though simple, align us with the rhythm of life itself. In the old monasteries of Mount Athos, the monks would begin their day with honey and prayer. They believed the first taste of the morning should be of something that reflected the nature of God, pure, golden, uncorrupted. They said that honey opened the heart to compassion, that it cleared the mind for contemplation. It was their way of aligning with the divine frequency before the noise of the world could intrude. And perhaps, without knowing, they were practicing the same alchemy as the bees, turning the mundane into the miraculous. Because honey teaches transformation through devotion. The bee does not hoard. It gathers, gives, dies, and is born again through the hive. Its life is an unbroken cycle of service. It takes from the flower, but it also gives, carrying pollen that allows life to continue. That exchange, that invisible rhythm of giving and receiving, is the same rhythm that sustains all creation. When we live out of harmony with that rhythm, we wither. When we return to it, we heal. That is the secret the ancients saw in honey, not just sweetness, but the pattern of transformation itself. To live like honey is to live as a bridge between light and matter, giving and receiving, heaven and earth. It is to turn every drop of life, even the bitter ones, into sweetness. In many old healing traditions, honey was mixed with herbs and blessed water to create what they called living medicine. But the power did not come only from the plants or the liquid, it came from intention. The healer would whisper prayers as they stirred, infusing the honey with thought, emotion, and gratitude. The mixture would then be given to the sick, and more often than not, healing followed. The rational mind may call it coincidence, but what if the bees, in their silent wisdom, have always known that energy, thought, word, vibration, can shape matter? That honey, in its perfect molecular balance, is the ideal vessel for carrying intention. When you speak love into honey, it listens. When you speak fear, it recoils. The ancients may not have used the language of quantum fields or molecular resonance, but they understood something deeper, that everything in nature is responsive. That transformation begins not from the outside, but from within, from the alignment of the heart. The journey of the bee is the journey of the soul. It ventures into the unknown, drawn by fragrance, by desire, by curiosity, by the pull of beauty. It gathers experience, light, knowledge. It returns home changed. The nectar it carries back is no longer what it once was. It has been transformed by motion, by vibration, by the invisible labor of love. Out of that journey, sweetness is born. So too with us. Every sorrow, every joy, every moment of stillness becomes nectar when it is transmuted by awareness. When we learn, when we forgive, when we surrender, we are performing the same alchemy that the bees perform in flight. Transformation is not about escape, it is about integration. Honey never denies where it came from. It remembers every flower, every storm, every season. Its sweetness is not the absence of bitterness, but its transmutation. The bee does not reject the wild, it gathers it. It collects both fragrance and dust, light and shadow, and from it creates harmony. So too must we. We are not meant to avoid life, but to refine it. To take all that we encounter, pain, joy, loss, wonder, and through patience and presence, transform it into wisdom. Honey is the living metaphor for this process. It shows us that enlightenment is not a destination, but a transformation of state. From nectar to honey, from ignorance to understanding, from separation to unity. And in that transformation lies peace. For the soul that learns to see as the bee sees, every flower becomes sacred. Every drop of rain becomes holy. Every act, no matter how small, becomes part of the great rhythm of creation. The secret of honey is not only that it heals the body, but that it teaches the heart to live again in harmony with the divine. In ancient Egypt, the high priests of the temple of Heliopolis spoke of a golden liquid called the tears of Ra. It was said that whoever consumed it would be reborn, not in body but in consciousness. They described how the substance brought clarity to the mind, purity to the heart, and light to the eyes. It was honey, consecrated, sung over, infused with intention. They believed that within its sweetness lay the vibration of immortality. To the uninitiated, it was ritual. To those who had ears to hear, it was transformation. When they anointed the body with honey, they were not preserving flesh. They were reminding the soul that decay is not the end. Honey endures, and so does spirit. The two mirror each other, both reflections of eternity made tangible. Transformation, then, is not the act of becoming something else, but of remembering what has always been. Honey does not become gold. It already is gold in essence. It simply reveals what the light has hidden, and so we too must remember to stop striving to be divine, and instead awaken to the truth that divinity has always lived within us. The sweetness we seek in the world is a reflection of the sweetness we carry in our hearts. The bee gathers nectar from outside, but the honey is created within. Likewise, the soul gathers experiences from the world, but the wisdom, the sweetness, is formed in the heart. When you understand this, every moment becomes sacred, every act becomes alchemy. The words you speak, the thoughts you carry, the way you breathe, all become instruments of transformation. You become, like the bee, a vessel for light. The transformation that honey teaches is not one of appearance but of vibration. It invites us to vibrate at the frequency of gratitude, of service, of harmony. When we do, the bitterness of life dissolves, the chaos quiets, the heart softens, and then in that stillness you hear it. The hum, the same hum that fills the hive, the same hum that shaped the stars, the same hum that dwells in the chambers of your heart. It is the sound of transformation, the resonance of remembrance. The sweetness of honey becomes the sweetness of being. The food of the gods becomes the food of the soul. And in that sacred moment you realize the gods did not choose honey for its taste. They chose it because it mirrors the divine process, the transformation of light into life and life into love. There is a golden silence that appears when one truly listens to the hum of creation. It is not loud. It does not demand attention. It simply is. It moves beneath all things. The pulse of the earth, the vibration of the stars, the rhythm of breath. The same hum that fills the hive fills the human heart. The ancients called it the voice of God. The mystics called it the breath of spirit. And the bees, without ever naming it, lived by it. When you begin to understand the mystery of honey, you begin to awaken, not just to the world, but to the divine structure within it. The bee is not an insect, it is a living symbol. The hive is not a nest, it is a map of creation. And honey, golden, uncorrupted, eternal, is the essence of that creation condensed into form. The awakening begins when you see that the story of honey is the story of your own soul. Like the bee, you were sent into the garden of life to gather light. Every encounter, every joy, every sorrow. Each is a flower containing nectar. You travel through seasons, sometimes in sunlight, sometimes in storm, collecting fragments of experience. And through patience, reflection, and love, you transform those fragments into sweetness. That sweetness is wisdom. That wisdom is honey. That honey is your soul made visible. This is what the ancient mystics meant when they said, "Know thyself and you shall know the universe." Because within you lies the same sacred geometry that guides the bees, the same mathematical precision that shapes the honeycomb. Your heartbeat follows cosmic law. Your breath mirrors the tides. The rhythm of your body is not random, it is divine. You are not separate from creation. You are part of the hive of existence. The light that shines through honey shines through you. To awaken is to remember that you are not an observer of creation, but a participant in it. The ancients described the gods not as distant beings sitting on thrones of clouds, but as forces of nature moving through everything that lives. The sun was not merely a ball of fire, it was the eye of consciousness. The rain was not merely water, it was the tears of compassion. The bees were not merely creatures, they were the hands of the divine, turning light into sustenance. When honey was called the food of the gods, it was because it represented the union of opposites, spirit and matter, heaven and earth, sweetness and labor, life and death. Honey was proof that divinity could be embodied, that light could take form, that love could be made edible. And so to taste honey with awareness is to awaken to the truth that the divine is not above us, but within us, flowing through every cell, every heartbeat, every breath. In the temples of Delphi, the priests of Apollo spoke of an elixir known as the Amrita of the sun. It was honey infused with herbs and sunlight, prepared only during the solstice, when the sun was at its highest power. Those who drank it said they could see beyond sight, hear beyond sound, and feel the heartbeat of the earth. They were not hallucinating, they were awakening. The honey, charged with light, activated something dormant within them. Perhaps the gods did not feed on honey to sustain their bodies, but to sustain their remembrance. Modern science has a language for this now. Biophotons, tiny packets of light emitted by living cells, are what make the body shimmer with invisible energy. Honey, it turns out, carries one of the highest biophotonic frequencies of any natural substance. It literally contains light. When consumed, it shares that light with the body, enhancing cellular communication, restoring coherence to systems that have fallen into disharmony. The ancients did not have microscopes, but they had intuition. They knew that honey fed not just the flesh, but the soul. It brightened the eyes, steadied the heart, quieted the mind. Awakening is the recognition of light, both within and without. That is why in spiritual texts across the world, honey and light are often intertwined. The Vedas speak of madhu, the honey of consciousness, the sweetness that drips from the higher mind when it merges with the divine. The Hebrew mystics spoke of devash, the honey of prophecy, the sweetness that flows from the word of God into the heart of the prophet. Even the early Christians described heaven as a realm flowing with milk and honey, symbols of purity and enlightenment. The sweetness of honey is the sweetness of divine realization, the moment when one sees that life itself is sacred, that the ordinary is the extraordinary, that the material is spiritual. Honey teaches that awakening is not escape, it is presence. It is the art of seeing God in all things, in the flower, in the bee, in the hum, in the breath, in yourself. The bee does not separate its work from its worship. To the bee they are one and the same. It gathers nectar as devotion, builds as prayer, and dies as offering. In the hive there is no hierarchy, no ego, no division. Each bee lives for the whole, and the whole lives through each bee. This is the law of the universe and the law of unity. The same law that governs the galaxies governs the hive. The hexagon, the shape of the honeycomb, is the perfect expression of that unity. 6 sides, 6 directions. It represents balance, harmony, interconnectedness. It is the same shape found in the molecular structure of water, the arrangement of snowflakes, the carbon rings that form your DNA. The same design repeats itself from the smallest cell to the largest galaxy. The ancients saw this pattern and understood, all is one. To awaken is to see that pattern not as coincidence, but as communication. The universe speaks in geometry, in vibration, in light, and honey is one of its most eloquent expressions. When you look at a jar of honey, you are looking at condensed sunlight, sacred geometry, and divine order, all made visible. To hold it is to hold the cosmos in your hands. To taste it is to participate in creation. And this is where the awakening deepens, when you realize that every act of awareness, every moment of gratitude, every conscious breath creates honey within you. Not literal honey, but spiritual nectar, the sweetness of peace, the lightness of love, the radiance of presence. The body is the hive, the heart is the queen, the mind is the worker bee, restless, diligent, sometimes lost in labor. But when the mind serves the heart, when thought serves love, the hive thrives. When the mind forgets its devotion, the hive collapses. So the awakening is a return to the inner hive where the queen's hum, the song of the soul, keeps all things in order. Listen closely. You can hear it now, beneath the noise of thought, beneath the hum of machines, beneath the pulse of time. It is faint, but steady. The hum of your own existence. The sound of your cells communicating in light, the sacred vibration of being alive. The ancients heard it in the bees. We can hear it in silence, and when you begin to live in tune with that hum, everything changes. Food tastes different. Air feels alive. Time softens. You begin to see the divine symmetry in all things. The way sunlight filters through leaves, the way a child laughs, the way your own breath moves in and out like waves upon an unseen shore. This is what honey reveals, that life in its truest form is sweet, not because it is easy, but because it is whole. The sweetness is not in the absence of sorrow, but in the presence of meaning. When you awaken to this, bitterness no longer poisons you. The wounds that once defined you begin to glow with light. You see that even pain is nectar, waiting to be transformed. That even the sting of the bee is part of the gift, a reminder that healing and hurt are woven together, that growth often tastes sharp before it becomes sweet. To awaken is to stop fighting the pattern, to surrender to it, to let the hum guide you home. The monks of the Sinai desert once taught that every living being produces a unique vibration, a note in the symphony of creation. When that note falls out of tune, illness arises. When it returns to harmony, healing begins. Honey, they said, restores the note. It helps the body remember its original song. That is the power of awakening, to hear the music of your own being again. The mystery of honey is not a secret to be solved, but a truth to be remembered. The divine does not dwell in temples or heavens, but in vibration, in light, in sweetness, in you. You are the hive, you are the hum, you are the honey. And when you live in awareness of that truth, every moment becomes sacred, every act becomes worship, every breath becomes a prayer. That is the awakening honey offers, a quiet, golden, eternal remembrance that you were never separate from the divine, only asleep to it. And now, as the hum grows louder within you, the light begins to rise. When the journey reaches its end, it does not end. It circles back, softly, silently, to where it began. The hum, the light, the sweetness. The mystery of honey is not a story with a conclusion, but a song that continues to echo through time, through breath, through being. For as long as there is sunlight, there will be bees. And for as long as there are hearts capable of wonder, there will be those who understand that honey was never only about taste. It was about remembrance. In the quiet hours of dawn, when the world holds its breath, you can almost feel it, the same energy that once stirred in the temples, in the hives, in the sacred hands that poured golden offerings upon stone altars. It moves still. It has never stopped. The bees still rise with the sun, the flowers still open to light, the air still carries that faint vibration that says, all things are connected. We too are part of this chain. Each thought, each breath, each act of kindness, another drop in the honeycomb of existence. The ancients knew this. That is why they treated the simplest elements, water, salt, honey, fire, with reverence. To them these were not materials, but mirrors of the divine. They saw the sacred where we see the ordinary. They remembered that the smallest sweetness can awaken the greatest truth. And that truth is this: life is meant to be lived with devotion. Every act of creation, no matter how small, carries the potential for holiness. The bee does not know it builds temples, yet it does. You do not know that each breath you take harmonizes with the rhythm of the cosmos, yet it does. You may not see it, but you are part of something vast, luminous, and good. Honey reminds you of that goodness, that sweetness that survives all bitterness. Think of the jars of honey found in Egyptian tombs, still fragrant after 3,000 years. They remain because they were made in alignment with divine order. When something is created in balance, it endures. The same is true of you. What you build in harmony with love cannot decay. What you give in sincerity becomes eternal. And perhaps that is the quiet message of the food of the gods, that eternity is not beyond reach. It is built drop by drop, act by act, through presence and care. The bee does not rush. It does not question its purpose. It simply serves, and through that service, it creates immortality. You too can live this way. To live as the bee lives is to move with grace, to take only what you need, to create more than you consume, to transform what is fleeting into what is lasting. It is to labor in devotion, to rest in peace, and to know that every humble act of goodness adds light to the hive of the world. That is how heaven is built, not in distant realms, but here, in every gentle act, every kind word, every moment of gratitude. The ancients would say that when one lives in harmony with the rhythm of creation, honey begins to flow from within, a spiritual sweetness, invisible yet tangible, that emanates through the eyes, the voice, the presence. Those who carry this inner honey heal others simply by being. They bring peace without speaking, comfort without effort. Their sweetness is not of the world, but of the soul. And perhaps that is what the phrase food of the gods truly means, that the divine feeds not on offerings of gold or sacrifice, but on sweetness, on harmony, on love. When you hold honey in your hand, you hold more than nourishment. You hold sunlight, patience, devotion, and the memory of perfection. It invites you to slow down, to breathe, to taste, to listen. In its golden silence, honey teaches gratitude, the kind that humbles and elevates at once. The ancients poured it upon altars. We can pour it upon our hearts. A spoonful before sleep, a drop upon the tongue at dawn. These small gestures become rituals of connection. They remind the body that the earth provides. They remind the soul that sweetness still exists. And as the sweetness melts within, it carries a message that words cannot hold, that you are already whole, that the divine does not ask for grandeur, only awareness, that you are part of something infinite, and that infinity can be tasted if you are still enough to feel it. Honey is the stillness of sunlight made edible. It does not shout, it whispers. And when you listen to that whisper, you remember every act of nature, every beat of life, every vibration in the air is a prayer, and you are part of it. The bees never stopped singing their hymn. It is we who stopped hearing it. But when you sit in silence, when you taste honey slowly, and let it dissolve upon your tongue, the hum returns. It moves through your chest, through your breath, through the space between your thoughts. It tells you that all is one, that nothing is lost, that sweetness endures. The mystery of honey was never about the gods above. It was about the God within. The light that fills the hive is the same light that fills your soul. The harmony that guides the bees is the same harmony that guides your heart. The eternal sweetness that never decays is the same sweetness waiting within you, unspoiled, patient, eternal. And so, as the sun sets upon the fields and the bees return home heavy with gold, you too return, to yourself, to the center of your being, to the quiet hum that has always been there. You breathe, you listen, you remember. The world is not broken. It is unfinished honey, still being made. And your life, your kindness, your awareness, your love, is one more drop of sweetness added to the hive of eternity. In the end, that is the true mystery of honey and why it has been called the food of the gods. Because it teaches us how to live as they do, in balance, in devotion, in sweetness. And when you live this way, heaven is no longer a destination. It becomes the air around you. It becomes the hum within you. It becomes the golden thread running through every heartbeat, whispering softly, "Be still, be sweet, be light."